Hey everybody, it's me, your favorite soft drink beverage, root beer, and today we're going to be doing a Kyouka deck profile because it was the deck I brought to locals last week, and also the lyrical set in Japan just finished revealing, so it's like somewhat timely. Let's get into it, shall we? So, first things first, let's establish what Kyoka is supposed to be doing. So, the grade 3 Kyoka, Make a Trend, has an act ability where you can Soul Blast 1, choose a grade from 1 to 3, declare it, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to one unit card with the declared grade from among them, and call it to Rearguard Circle. Or you can choose a magazine card from among them and reveal it, and put it into your hand and shuffle your deck. And then she has a continuous effect during your turn. If you played a magazine order, all of your front row units get plus 5,000. And then the grade 2, when it's rode upon by the grade 3, you can choose a magazine order from your drop zone, put it into your hand. If you didn't put anything in your hand, you can counterblast 1 and search your deck for a magazine instead. Then the grade 1, when it's rode upon by a grade 2 with Kyouka in its name, you can choose a grade from 1 to 3, declare it, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose the declared grade or a magazine card and shuffle it. So, what is a magazine card? So, magazines are normal orders. The grade 1 Lyrical Shooting Stars says, play it if you have a Vanguard with Kyouka in its name and perform all of the following effects based on the number of your units. So, 2 or more grade 1 units, draw 2 cards, choose a card from your hand and discard it. 2 or more grade 2 units, choose one of your units and gets power plus 10,000. And 2 or more grade 3s, you countercharge 1. So, kind of the gimmick of this deck is that you're going to be building a board with all these different grades to try and resolve lyrical shooting stars. We also have a second magazine order that was a promo. So this one's a grade 3 Lyrical Shooting Stars special issue. You play it with Counterblast 1 if you have a Vanguard with Kyouka. You choose 2 normal units from your drop zone with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard and different grades and call them to Rearguard Circle. Then, if you have 1 or more units of grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3, then you can play orders 2 times and you can only play Lyrical Shooting Stars. So basically, this is kind of a supplemental support to help you build a board to be able to resolve all of the effects of the original lyrical shooting stars. So let's start talking about all of the dedicated support cards that I think could be options for you to consider before talking about all of the generic cards. So, first things first, we have Untarnished Gold Silver Eisbit. So, at the beginning of your battle phase, if you played a magazine order, you can put it into your soul, draw a card, choose one of your grade 2 or less units, and it gets power plus 5,000. So, one of the awkward things about Kyoka is that because you need like every grade of card in order to get all the effects of lyrical shooting stars, you are going to end up in a place where you have like a bunch of grade 2s and a grade 3 that like can't really do anything in the back row. And so this being able to like put itself into soul can help fuel the soul blast cost of the original Kyoka. And then you can draw so it kind of cycles itself and becomes a net 0, and then you give something plus 5,000, and extra power is always nice. Next up, we have Plenty Research Norma. So this is a grade 2, also from set 2, just like Eisbit. So when it's placed on Rearguard Circle, you can Counterblast 1, search your deck for one magazine card, reveal it, put it to your hand, shuffle the deck, and then if you play the magazine order, it gets boost. So similar to Eisbit, it can kind of help resolve like the weird board states where you have a bunch of like grade 2s and a grade 3 where now you can make this a booster so putting it in the back row doesn't hurt, and then it searches out a magazine order which you can already do with your Kyokas, but like it doesn't necessarily hurt to have extra options to search. Next up, and I accidentally put it in here twice, and I'm too lazy to resolve that. Creative Urge Seblu. So this was from the last lyrical set. When it's placed on Rearguard Circle, if you have a Vanguard with Kyoka, you can have it get grade plus 1 until end of turn. So this is another way to kind of get all of the different grades is you just play more grade 2s, but then you can also have this become a grade 3. So, Norma has the ability to boost, so you could get into a position where you have this plus Norma, so this would count as a grade 3, and then Norma could be a booster for it. And then at the end of the battle attacks, if you play the magazine order, you can put into your soul, give something 5k. So the downside to this compared to just playing Bit is that this doesn't get to draw a card, so it doesn't really cycle itself in the same way that Bit does. And then, that could be a little bit awkward where you're just kind of going minus. I think, like, if you're going to choose between the two of them, you might as well just play the natural grade 3. Also, if you're in a position where you just end up leaving this on the board, then it loses the grade boost the next turn. So you're going to have to, like, keep calling it back out if you want to, like, make it a grade 3. I don't love this card. I wasn't really playing it when I went to locals. Next up, Blue Frontier Arche. So this was from the original wave of support back in Lyrical 3. So during your turn, if you play the magazine order, it gets plus 5,000. And at the end of the battle, your grade 3 or greater Vanguard attack. If you play the magazine order this turn, you can Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, and stand this unit. So this is your main form of pressure, being a restander. And theoretically, the deck can make 5 attacks with this if you have 2 Arches in your front row and just, but yeah, this is kind of a non-negotiable card. Kyouka, as of right now, doesn't really have a way of making additional attacks. You are very reliant on this card. Absolutely a 4 of. So this is another card from the original set. If you play the magazine order, you can just counterblast 1, give it plus 10k. Because the original Lyrical Shooting Stars does countercharge, like Counterblast is not the most like in-demand resource that you have. You're gonna definitely use one for Arche, and then the special issue Counterblast as well, but like I said, you also countercharge one, and like Kyouka herself doesn't counterblast, and neither does like a lot of your support. Admittedly, if you are choosing to play Norma in the deck, that is a counterblast, so it is something to think about. This wasn't really something I see people playing. Like, it's fine, like, plus 10k is nice, but you do actually already get a decent power boost, both from Kyouka herself and, like, Lyrical Shooting Stars. So, I'm putting it in here because it says magazine order, but realistically, I'm not sure this actually sees play. Next up, today's selfie, Freitas. So another new card from DZ-02. If you have Vanguard with Kyouka in its card name, when you would search or choose a magazine order from your deck, you can choose this card instead. Back row rearguard circle. At the end of your turn, you can retire it, choose a card with Kyouka in its card name, or a magazine order from your drop zone and put it into your hand. So this is a very powerful piece of support. Helps to make Kyouka a little bit more consistent. The search effect can whiff if you call the wrong grade and you don't find a magazine. So this is just like another thing you can get out of the deck just to like maintain your advantage. It also means like if you're missing a grade 1 specifically, you can search this out instead and have that option. And then the ability to retire itself to like get back a Kyouka or a magazine means you can somewhat guarantee you have persona rides when you get like later into the game, or if you're just trying to maintain your resource loop of magazines, like this gets it back for you. Very powerful piece of support, definitely a 4 of. Let's see, is this one of them? No. All right. Next up, in search of limited sweets, Mildred. So at the end of the battle, it boosted. If you play the magazine order this turn and you have 3 or more different grades, then you put it into Soul and draw a card. So gets you Soul, which is always nice, and then draws a card. So similar to Bit, it's just a card that like cycles itself. It's a grade 1. It's nice. Next up, do my airy best Ainia. So this was from the festival collection, and it's also a piece of support that's like shared with Lutetia because that's what they were doing during festival collection. When it's placed on rearguard circle by a card's ability, so this can be like Kyoko's ability, or it can be like the grade 3 magazine order. And you have a grade 3 or greater with Kyoko or Lutetia, you can soul charge 1 and it gets 5k. So this card is all right. It's not like amazing. It's a 13k booster. It does soul charge, which is nice for Kyoko because it's like you need soul for both Arche and the search effect, but it's also not amazing. Like, I think the ability to cycle for a draw while also getting soul is like probably better. Plus, like Icebit already kind of does the same thing where it gives something 5k and then like gets you a soul and a draw. Like, I don't know that this card is strictly necessary, although it's like fine. From Lyrical 3, we also have Best Choice Laudomia. So if you have a grade 3 or greater Kyouka in this card name, you can put it into Soul. Choose a grade 2 or greater unit card from your drop zone with a different name as your Vanguard and put it on top of your deck. So this is just a way to guarantee the top 5 search of Kyouka. You like take something from the drop zone, put it on top of your deck. It does kind of become a bit redundant with Special Issue, which can also just revive things from the drop zone. Plus, there's like a bit of a weird timing with this one because like you still need to have grade ones to get all of the effects, right? So it's like you put this into Soul and you stack something for the guaranteed search, and then great, now you have to like replace the grade one. So again, something I'm putting in here because it says Kyouka in its name, but like, And then finally, like Saturate Fortune Lorena. So if your drop zone has a magazine, it gets 2k and 5k shield. Extra shield value is always nice. It's a 9k booster, which is like awkward. Uh, this card is just here because it says magazine on it. I don't think you actually play it. So, moving on to more like generic stuff. So, some of it is just like stuff that gains like boost or has something to do with like normal orders. Some of them are more just like the powerful lyrical generics. So, this one is like the Rain Like a Maiden's Heart, Rizali. So, if you play the normal order this turn, this gets boost. So, kind of an alternative to Icebit if you just wanted something that like stayed on the board and got value. This can become a booster if you play a magazine because they're normal orders, so you still have the grade 3s, you kinda get the little extra power boost from having, like, a grade 3 booster. So, it's okay, I just think, like, the value of getting the extra draw and a soul is better on Icebit. Next up, the new generic lyrical from set 2, Franquette. So, when it's chosen by the effect of a Chris Rain, it gets 10k. This is completely irrelevant. The thing that we all care about is the second ability, which is generic. When it attacks, if you have 3 or more different names, it gets power plus 5,000. And then if you have 4 or more different names, then choose one of your other rear guards and return it to your hand. So this does a lot for you. It's a way to get early game pressure going because you can kind of dump down a bunch of cards, attack, attack. Franquette's column will probably be like 23k, which hits over a defensive trigger and kind of puts your opponent in an awkward place. Plus, if you went first and you're attacking a grade 2, that also gets over a 15k shield, which is pretty big. And then it also helps you like dodge removal. So like Arche in particular, your opponent is probably going to want to snipe, so being able to bounce back to your hand is nice. Yeah, you can bring it back with special issue, but you kind of get run into a problem where you need so many like different grades available to you that you're not always going to be able to revive everything you want and also get every effect of shooting stars if that's what you're going for. So, being able to like bounce back and protect some of your grades is like pretty important. So, Franket is nice to have. Speaking of generic cards that bounce to your hand, Yuika. Yuika is always an option in every lyrical deck, almost. Like, unless you're doing something very, very specific, or you're playing a deck that needs, like, all archetypal names, Yuika is always something you consider. So, when your other unit is placed in the same column as this unit, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, it gets 5k. And then at the end of the battle, it boosts the rear guard. You can Soul Blast 1, choose the boosted rear guard, and return it to your hand. So, yeah, Yuika's insane, and obviously the combination of Yuika and Franquette is crazy. So you can like dump out your whole hand and then like attack, attack, attack with Franquette, bounce it back to your hand. Then you can use Yuika, bounce Franquette back to your hand. Now your front row is clear, so your opponent can't damage deny you. It's such a good combination. I think the only thing about Yuika in this deck is that you are soul blasting a decent amount. Kyouka has to do it. Arche has to do it. You have cards that make up the missing souls, so like Icebit does it, Mildred does it. You can manage it, but it is a lot of soul to be using in one turn, and also just like deck space is a problem. because you're going to be playing both magazines at like some ratio, probably running like a lot of them just so you can find it, that does take up space in the deck that could have gone to Yuika. And also, like, the gimmick of needing all the different grades means you do have to kind of balance your ratio of grades too, so that you can find all of the grades and get them in rotation so you can set up all of your plays. So, Yuika is very good, just kind of runs into a weird position where the deck already has a couple of grade ones that it wants to play, and so in order to maintain good ratios, like Yuika just might not make it for being in that awkward place. Next up, cycler cards. So Prescia, this is the set one cycles where if it's discarded, you can counterblast or energy blast a draw, and then on play Persona Ride, you can counterblast or energy blast, choose one of your units, gets 5k, and then at the end of turn, return it to your hand. Uh, the the cyclers are always good. This runs into the problem of deck space. Like I said, you are having to play like both the orders, and then you have to think about like a balanced grade ratio so you can find everything. And Prescia is just another card that like doesn't necessarily make the cut. And also, like discarding is not necessarily bad because you have special issue to bring things back. And also, I forgot to put it in the deck, but Valshablan is basically the same thing, although Soul is a little less in demand, or sorry, a little more in demand because you're Soul Blasting so much. So I think adding another Soul Blast cost with Valshablan's cycle effect probably doesn't work out. So yeah, I think you're just in a place where because you can revive from the drop zone, the cycle cards are not strictly necessary. Like yeah, it's nice to dig deeper into the deck, but the list is already like kind of full. Next up, Strega. So, if it's placed on rear other than by a unit card's ability, if you played in normal order this turn, you can Soul Blast 1, look at the top 5, choose 1, call it, and then if it's a unit card, or add it to your hand if it's a normal order. This does synergize with the magazines. The grade 3 magazine can call it, and this also works if placed from hand after the fact. And then, when it attacks a grade 3 or greater unit, if it was placed this turn, you can Counterblast 1, draw a card, gets power plus 10,000, so Counterblast is a little more flexible. Yes, you need it for Arche and special issue, but you also get a counter charge. So, like, you could manage to spend like 3 Counterblast in one turn and still end up in a place where you're not hurting for resources. Once again, I think the problem with Strega is just deck space. Like, because you need the magazines, you need to have Arche, like, your spots for grade 2s are kind of limited, and, Strega also needs like Strega only works when it's placed that turn. So you would have to do this awkward thing of like either bouncing it to hand with Yuika, which would like radically change your deck list, or you'd have to like intercept with it and then revive it with the special issue. So like it's a good card and it has synergies with Kyouka where like you can get an additional call or you can use it to like search deeper into your deck for orders, just like combination of deck space and just like a little bit awkward with how the way like magazine wants to work means that like I think Strega might not necessarily make the cut. Next up, we have the Jeweled Beast. So, 20k shield or being able to cycle a Persona Ride are both good abilities. Like, you're probably only going to play one of because I have run into situations where it's like, I needed to use some of the ride line cards to fulfill all the grade requirements for shooting stars, which is like kind of the only reason. And then the other thing is just, again, deck space. And then finally, there's just like a bunch of generic cards that have come out recently that I don't think are amazing, but like are maybe worth at least talking about. So this is from set 2, so when it's placed on hand other than by a unit card's ability, or when it's placed on rearguard circle other than by a unit card's ability, you can counterblast 1, take a normal order from draw, put it into your hand. So similar to Norma, this is another way to like get consistency with your magazine orders. It doesn't retire itself the same way that Freitas does, although, it does cost a counterblast, which if you put too many counterblast costs into the deck, that does start to become a bit of a problem, right? Next is the generic double Rs. So This one is Orpha from set 2. When it's placed on rearguard circle from hand, if you didn't play any orders, you can discard a card, search your deck for an order that's not a Regalis piece, discard it, and it gets the ability to be played from the drop zone and then goes back to your deck. So it is a way to search out your magazine orders. I don't know that you necessarily need it or have the space for it, but it is an option there for you. Speaking of other things that could get you generic orders, or generic cards that can get you orders, Mystica, Pellucid, Jennifer. So if you have 4 or more units, discard a card from your hand, choose a normal order from your drop zone. You can play it from the drop zone and then shuffle it back into the deck or put it to the bottom of your deck. So similar to the other one, it's a way for you to play orders from the drop zone if you don't have a way of searching for them. But again, Freitas can already search them back. Kyouka can search it with her own ability. If you choose to play Norma, that's a searcher. And those have better synergies with Kyouka. They're a little more flexible. So, these are fine. They're just kind of expensive and not as flexible as the dedicated support cards. Next up, A Ballad of My Own Someday, Siska. So another generic rare that's not terrible. So if it's placed on rearguard and you don't have another rearguard with the same name as it, if you have 4 or more, you can counterblast 1 to draw a card, so a way to dig deeper into the deck. Or you can energy blast to give it 10k until end of turn, so help to boost up your power, and then energy is a resource that is currently not being used, so a way to just burn through your energy and get a bit of extra power and pressure going could be considered. Once again, the problem is really just deck space. Smart Catch Olivie. So if it boosts a rearguard, if you have 5 or more units, which very likely you will just because of the way the magazines work, you can soul charge 1 and give it 5k. So, like I said, soul can be pretty in demand. Kyouka uses it, Arche uses it. If you choose to play Yuika, that uses it. So this is a generic soul charge, and it's a 13k booster. Not terrible, but probably not as good as the dedicated support cards. And then finally, Hasty Loafer Nina. So another generic card from set 1. So when it boosts, if you have 3 or more units with different card names, you can counterblast and energy blast to draw a card. This unit gets 5k. So drawing cards is nice. You have other cards that already do it. I'm just putting it here because it's generic, but I don't know that you necessarily need to be playing something like this. So that's kind of all of the things that I was thinking about off of the top of my head. I think I missed a Spray Art Tila, actually. So this was the generic double R from set 2. So when it's placed other than by a unit card's ability, you can Soul Blast 1, bounce a opponent's rearguard and to their hand, and then if they return the card, they discard a card. So this is pseudo removal, right? You can get something off of the board and then your opponent has to discard something. The problem is your opponent makes all of the choices, so you can't just get lucky and snipe a good card from their hand. You also can't make them bounce back a bad unit that they might not want to bounce back. So with this, they can just choose an on-play ability, put it back into their hand, and it's haha, I can just reset my on-play ability. It's not great. It's an interesting card, and it's again, a sort of removal. I just wish we had more control over it. And then I think I also missed this one. So Treetop Diddy Edita. So when this unit boosts, you can Soul Blast 1, choose one of your other rear guards against boost. So, like I said, you need all these different grades. Sometimes you get into awkward positions, so giving something boost can help resolve those board states. I think the deck doesn't need something like this, but it was something to think about. Alright, so that should have been all of the cards that I was kind of considering, so now let's look at some actual deck profiles. So first things first is the list I actually took to my locals. So running all of the Kyouka ride line, we're running 3 of Eisbit, like I said, the utility of her is just too good. Obviously we're running our Persona rides. I was running 3 Franquettes because I also wanted to give Norma a try in the deck. So like I said, Franquette really good for the early game, really good for protecting Arche. It also just gets 5k, which combined with Eisbit can become 10 and gives you some pretty good numbers. Arche is non-negotiable, it is your restander. Kratos, I think, is also non-negotiable, like, makes your searching more consistent and then cycles back your magazine order so that you can have a bit of consistency there. Mildred gets you a draw and extra soul, which you can use. But also, another thing is that, like, putting things into soul is, like, relatively safe from removal, so if you can, like, get into soul and then you soul blast it, you can then bring them back with special issue, so you kind of form a bit of a resource loop with that. And so I'm playing 7 magazine orders. We're playing 4 of Shooting Stars because ultimately that is the big payoff of the deck. And then 3 of Special Issue just because I am playing a bunch of ways to search it, and depending on like the board state and what opponent you're playing against, if they don't have any kind of removal, you don't necessarily always need to be resolving it. And then finally for triggers, I was just kind of porting over the triggers I already had. So I was going like 8 crit, 3 draw, 4 heal, blue OT, and of course our sentinels. I didn't love draw triggers, to be honest. Like, you already burn through a ton of your deck with like searching out the magazines, calling off of Kyouka, drawing off Mildred and Icebit. Like, you could run the risk of decking yourself out, but also I just kept running into situations where I needed the shield value. I had one game where my opponent tacked for like 43, and I had 3 draw triggers in my hand, and I was just like, alright, GG. You know, that was a fun time, so I'm gonna admit I didn't love Norma in the deck. I felt like I already found all of the magazines I wanted and didn't super need it, and like I said, also didn't love the use of draw triggers. Like, I think you just already have enough draw power, and so extra shield value from fronts probably makes more sense. Also, I was running the crit or the re-standing heal trigger, because we have a lot of those this meta. We have like Shiranui, we have Varga, Blankmeyer actually plays into both. Zorga plays into both with the divine skill, so like this actually does hit a lot of decks. Although, like I said, there was that one game where I had like a bunch of draw triggers plus this guarding against an attack that I just couldn't block because they were all 10k shields, and it was like exactly matching, and I wanted to end my life. Uh Anyways, the revised deck list, I just swapped out the 2 copies of Norma for 2 copies of Yuika. I really found myself, like, missing that early game pressure that Yuika can provide. There's a possibility I might go, like, 3-3 of, like, 3 Mildred, 3 Yuika, because I do still want the soul from Mildred, especially if Yuika is going to be adding another Soul Blast cost to make, like, 3 in 1 turn. And, like, late game, you don't necessarily need to be bouncing with Yuika, like, Franquette can kinda fulfill that role instead. Like, really, Yuika is just 'cause, like, I wanna try and bolster the early game a bit more. That was something else I felt about the other list was, like, not enough early game pressure. And, of course, we're replacing the, draw triggers with fronts for the extra shield value because, god damn it, I really wanted that. Also just went back to 4 regular triggers because the one game that I had, like, the re-standing heal and it, like, might have come up because I was playing against Almagestar, it wasn't enough. And also, they were just on the original Astroya, so, like, they didn't even restand, it was useless. So, I really just every time I try to play the effect heals, something happens to turn me back off of them. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. What do you think about Kyouka? Unfortunately, the deck is in a bit of a weird place right now because of the new set hype for Lyrical for DZ Lyrical 1. All of the like important support cards like the original Kyouka and Arche are now like much more expensive, but we still have a few more months before the new lyrical set comes out in English, so hopefully there will be time for the prices to stabilize a bit. But for now, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye!